And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I have a great pleasure to introduce Brett Johnson again. Brett, thanks for joining. How are you today?
David, I'm great. How are you? Just recovering from COVID. I guess I was patient zero in the house. Gave it to everybody else. But we didn't die. We recovered. So, I've still got some of this like fatigue. You wouldn't know it, but some fatigue, some phlegm as well. So if I go into a coughing fit, you'll know what's going on.
I'll hit the pause button and then we'll let you cough it up. Hey, so I noticed that you've changed your title to the Chief Criminal Officer, which, by the way, there's one other one on LinkedIn.
Really? Who's the other one?
Well, you're gonna have to find out for the viewers watching it. Look it up.
I'll look it up.
I don't know if that's real. I think it's just only you who's a real one, because the other one looks like it's been on the job for 114 years. Which
yes, okay. There you go.
It's kind of a dead giveaway, I think. So somebody did not try hard. So what's that all about? Maybe you jump into that. Congrats.
What's that all about, right? I mean, it's I met Kevin Goschak over at Arcos. I met him, I guess, 3 years ago. You lose time with the pandemic and everything, but I met him probably 3 years ago. I was in San Francisco at the CNP conference, and we had scheduled a meeting outside of that to go into Arcos and talk to the gentleman. And I thought he was great. I truly did. Kind of forgot about it after that. I was like, it's a good company. They're doing a great job. Didn't hear anything at all from Arcos or communicate with them at all until this year. About Fraud invited me to come in for a webinar. So I sat down and Kevin was there, and we just started talking in the webinar. And after that, he was like, I'd kind of like to work with you. And I was like, I'd kind of like to work with you. So after some meetings, after I sat down with a couple of online roundtables that he did with some CISOs with other companies, Kevin invited me to come in and act as Chief Criminal Officer. Now, what does that mean? I think that we are still trying to figure out what that means. Hell, David, you know me. I'm not the corporate guy. So it's one of these things like, okay, how is Brett Johnson going to fit in a corporate structure? And I don't think anyone really knows that quite yet. I'm very good. My chief duties are to talk about the threats that are taking place, the threats that are coming into play, talking to engineers about the products that are in development, helping with that, talking to clients and potential clients, and basically just being that criminal officer of talking about cybercrime and how to protect yourself from it, which I think it's a great position. It truly is. It's a great company. We are currently, I want to be careful with that. We are currently figuring out what that actually means as far as Brett Johnson in that corporate world. What does what can Brett Johnson be Brett Johnson? And I think I can, but I think that it's a learning process for both sides. Honestly.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And what's better than hiring ex-con, ex-criminal to consult on protecting from from cons, from.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. You need to understand the criminal mindset. A criminal like me that was on that ground floor of developing cybercrime. I have an understanding and insight that few people do. But more importantly, you have to be able to trust that individual that you're bringing in. You don't want to bring in that cyber criminal that's still engaged in crime. That would be a really bad idea. But, I'm the guy that I'm very fortunate, man. I mean, over the past few years, I've developed that trust with companies and law enforcement. And I'm the guy these days. I've actually talked to 3 or 4 people this past week that pointed it out to me. I'm the guy who I will say what needs to be said, regardless of consequence, regardless of who it may upset or anything else. If something needs to be said, I'll say it. And I'm trusted because of that. And I'm adamant about remaining doing that,
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing a phenomenal job. Listen, just to building yourself up after you went through a rough patch.
A rough patch.
listen,
that's a nice euphemism for 7.5 years in prison.
Well, politically correct. You gotta be politically correct these days, right?
I guess.
And you know what? I totally see like there's a growth trajectory here. You might have to hire other ex-criminals and create like an ex-criminal division within the company. I see that you're going to be the director or the VP of that division. In fact, I would see you just creating your own business completely. Why do you even need products? You just have to create like a bunch of ex-cons and then create.
Well, I'll run around wearing orange, so everyone knows who we are.
No, but in all seriousness, you're doing great. Like from a contribution perspective. First of all, I see that you've set up your own podcast now. You've been podcasting for a while now.
I have, and we're launching a new show, as you can see back behind me. We're launching a new show later this week called The Brett Johnson Show. I did the online fraudcast with Carice Hendrick. That was outstanding. We did a lot of good for a lot of merchants. I was the guy that throughout that entire show, I wanted to also talk to consumers and do more than just talk about merchant and e-commerce fraud. I launched the Anglerfish podcast with the idea of it being, basically starting out as a Brett Johnson bio, and then it kind of morphed into something that I didn't really know what the hell to do with it, to be honest with you. So we killed that off, and this week we're launching the Brett Johnson Show. I'm going to try to stay in my lane and talk about the stuff that I'm knowledgeable about, but I got to tell you, there's a lot of stuff I want to bitch about too. So.
Yes, and we'll kind of scratch some of those surfaces, scratch your itch, your bitch about stuff on this particular show. And but before we get started on that, why Anglerfish? Like, and why, you've it's a cool name, but is that because of the fish attributes and how it lures its prey?
Well, what happened was I was, Shadowcrew makes the front cover of Forbes like August of 2004. October 26, 2004, Secret Service arrest 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I was the only guy that got away. They picked me up February 8th, 2005, FBI and Charleston City Police Department.
So how many years later that was?
Geez, that was 2005. I was arrested. February 8th, 2005 I was arrested.
So were you on the run? Like, were you off the grid like for a while?
No. I was at that point in time. I had retired from Shadowcrew. I was the guy that invented this tax return identity theft scheme. That it's still the reason that people's tax returns are delayed every year. I'm that son of a bitch that did that. But I retired from Shadowcrew because I was stealing a lot of money doing that. And at the same time, we were getting intelligence, because criminals get intel as well. We were getting threat intel about the federals investigating us. Federal authorities, state authorities, worldwide authorities. Everyone was looking at Shadowcrew. I was the head of that group, so I got worried. I got scared. So I quit. And that's really what saved me from being arrested when Shadowcrew was shut down by authorities. What happens is I get popped about 4 months later, and the Secret Service comes in, takes over the investigation. They offer me a job, and I took it because I didn't want to go to prison. But I'm an idiot, so I'm the idiot that continues to commit crime from inside Secret Service offices for the next year. The investigation that I was part of, the operation that was coming out of Columbia, South Carolina.
Basically, Brett, you were double dipping. Yeah,
double agent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's idiot right here, and it comes with consequences. Believe you me.
But that's unbelievable. We did not cover that one like last time we talked, and it's just incredible to me that. What were you thinking? I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you knew it's a matter of time, right? Eventually, right?
I think everyone, and that's one thing I saw about most criminals. I don't care if it's a cyber criminal, bank robber, drug dealer. I served a lot of time with a lot of people who committed crime. And most of those individuals, as long as it wasn't an emotional crime, most of those individuals knew their end was coming. And what happens is almost always across the board, you adopt this philosophy of fatalism. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that allows you to continue breaking the law. I've got to do what I got to do. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So that's what we all did with Shadowcrew. We kept breaking the law, knowing the end was coming, and just, Maybe it'll happen, maybe not.
And do you have like an end result in mind? Like, some people say, well, we're going to hit $1 million. I'm going to retire. Not
Sure.
that you can do that today, but let's say, or some countries maybe. Is that something that criminals do as well, or is it just something they just keep on going no matter what?
No, the thing is that all criminals, all experienced or expert criminals say it. But there's a difference between saying it and doing it. Especially with cybercrime, we all on Shadowcrew, we all preached that idea of stealing enough money and getting out while the getting was good. I stole over $7 million, had a lot of it saved it overseas and everything else. But what happens is the ease of stealing money, the quickness with which it happens and the ease of which it happens, you forget the value of cash. You don't have a budget. I never had a budget. My budget was simply steal more money. And I think that's the way most criminals think. They have the idea that they'll stop at some point. It never happens because you continue to steal so much money. It keeps rolling in and you just don't worry about it after a while. And that's what gets people arrested. I mean, that's the thing about crime is you have to be on point every single day of your life as a criminal. Law enforcement only has to be on point one time. And when they are, that's when you go to prison. With me, that was my mindset when I started work with the Secret Service. Ego plays a huge part in a cyber criminal's life, especially in my life. And you can probably tell I've still got the ego. But then it was, hey, can I get by with it? And what happens is I was working out of the Columbia, South Carolina field office. They had me in this big war room and they had me hooked up to a laptop. Laptop was hooked up to a 50-inch plasma monitor on the wall so they could watch. Outside line, 2 Secret Service officers and a South Carolina law enforcement official was in the room at all times. They were hooked up to a desktop system sitting right next to me. Outside line as well. And my job was to go in there and gather threat intel, develop targets, and help out with investigations and train these agents on how cybercrime was happening. The first 2 weeks of that, because I'm in there 4 to 6 hours a night, and I'm very fast doing these types of things. So here I am just surfing the web and talking to these people and everything else. And the first 2 weeks, these officers were very diligent. After 2 weeks, they got very bored because it's boring to watch somebody surf the web at a speed that they can't even see what the hell is going on. They were recording everything on DVD-ROMs, but after 2 weeks, they got lazy. And these guys, instead of watching me, they started to watch porn on their outside line. So here I am, I'm watching it, and I'm like, well, shit, let's give this a try. So I started to break the law inside of the office. And again, it's that idea of fatalism that I've talked about. I knew I wasn't going to get away with that. But by that point, I had hit rock bottom. And truthfully, I was nowhere near rock bottom. But to me, that was the end of everything. And I was like, I'm just going to roll with it. So broke the law for the next 10 months inside of the offices. They found out about it. What happened was a friend of mine in Los Angeles, an associate, let's not call him a friend, an associate of mine in Los Angeles that I had trained on how to do tax return theft, he got rolled up in an investigation. So they went to arrest him, raided his apartment. He didn't have anything in the apartment. The night before, the apartment manager comes out and meets the agents in the parking lot, and he was like, "Hey, Sean here. Last night he had a U-Haul, and he loaded up a whole lot of stuff in the U-Haul and headed out." Well, that was evidently all the evidence. They come back to me the next day, and they're like, "We need you to take a polygraph to see if you've told this guy anything." I failed the polygraph horribly.
That is an incredible story.
Yeah,
I'm
they
surprised.
revoked my bond.
Brett, you're so intelligent and well-spoken. I mean, there's a reason why you have an ego. I mean, I'm surprised you did not train yourself to fool the polygraph. That's the thing. Hold beyond you. You have the capabilities to do just that.
Man, I read books. I practiced everything else. Still failed the polygraph, and so here they revoked my bond. Now I was only under a state charge at that point. State charges like 39 of them. The judge 2 weeks later rules that the feds revoked my bond improperly. He reinstates the bond. I walk out of jail. No one calls the Secret Service to tell them I walked out. So I'm like, well, hell, if they're going to screw me, they're going to have to find me. So I was dating this stripper. I called this stripper up and I was like, I need to borrow $1,000. She gave me $1,000 and I took off heading west on Interstate 20 out of Columbia, South Carolina. Ended up in Dallas, Texas. There was a prepaid debit card supplier there. Socially engineered that guy into giving me 63 prepaid debit cards without identification or cash or anything else. Use those to steal about $120,000 out of ATMs. That bankrolled this cross-country crime spree that I started. I stole $600,000 in the space of 4 months. Woke up one morning, I was in Las Vegas. Woke up one morning on the United States Most Wanted list, sat there kind of stunned looking at it, and said out loud, I literally said out loud, I was like, well, Johnson, you've made the United States Most Wanted list. What do you do now? And then I said, I'm going to Disney World. Yeah, so idiot did. Yeah.
So you went to Disney World?
Oh, yeah, I went to Disney World. I had a Jeep Cherokee. I loaded it up. I was in Las Vegas, drove all the way to Orlando. Rented a timeshare for 9 months, paid 9 months in advance for that, bought $30,000 in furniture to furnish the timeshare. And the plan was, hell, I'll just go to Disney World and Universal Studios for the next year, then burn out down to South America. Lasted 6 weeks. So they found me using one of these triggerfish devices. It's called a Stingray these days. They found me using one of those. Sent me to jail, or sent me to prison.
What's the Stingray again?
That is that cell phone spoofing tower.
Okay,
so it's a box where you can intercept text messages. You can locate someone within 7 feet. You can see every phone that's being used in the area. It's a very secret device. And it's a very effective device that a lot of law enforcement agencies use. And it's so secret that if you try to bring it up in court, many times the charges will be dismissed against you so that law enforcement doesn't have to disclose any information about it. So, yeah. So they use that.
I'm surprised, Brett, I'm surprised there's no, Netflix miniseries about you.
Well, hopefully there will be.
I'm telling you, like the stories you're telling me right now. I mean, just it's everything you mentioned, like within a period of 2 minutes is an episode.
I know, right? I know. It's a crazy
you can make
story.
it like dramatic and all that stuff. Like I didn't even ask you, like, what were you doing dating strippers at the time?
Oh man, I was man. My story on that. I got married when I was 24. Didn't start drinking until I was 34. I had never been to a strip club. I was married to my first wife. I was married to her for 9 years. Lied to her every single day of those 9 years. Took her 3 years to find out I was a criminal. The next 6 years were me telling her, oh, I've stopped. Oh, I'm going to stop. Oh, I will stop. Until I finally started telling her, well, you like spending all that money, don't you? She leaves me. And I went into a depression, got suicidal, everything else. Started seeing a psychologist. Damn psychologist. She did some good, man. She was trying to get me to stop committing crime and to go into real estate. And I used to joke with her, is there even a difference? But yeah, so.
Well, sometimes it's a fine line. Sometimes. I think the majority of them are they're okay, but there's a few bad apples like anywhere else.
But what happens is one night I was 34. I'd never been to a strip club in my life. That's the year I started drinking too. And I got lonely one night and I got horny and I was like, well, hell, why not go to one? And I figured I'd get laid. So I go in and naive. I mean, for me to be this criminal genius, mastermind, whatever you want to call him, I was a very naive individual. So I walked in and I'm the idiot that literally falls in love with the first stripper that he sees. First one. She walks by. I'm like, that's the one.
That is so cliche.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can't go more cliche than that. That's like
you talk about cliche. She had graduated college with a religious studies major.
No.
Yeah. No shit on that one. Move her in with me.
Well, she was trying to convert you, obviously.
Exactly, right? So move her in with me. I find out she's addicted to coke, another cliche. Not only is she addicted to coke, she's prostituting herself, another cliche. And I'm that naive guy, man. I get it in my head that I can fix her, that we can love each other forever. And I go broke doing it. Shadowcrew gets popped at about the same time that's going on. I go through all my stateside cash, don't have any money coming in. Shadowcrew's shut down, so I can't go back into a credit theft. It's after tax season, so I can't steal any money in taxes. All my other cash is overseas. I can't access it. So I start running counterfeit cashier's checks and get arrested doing that is what happens. That was the capture, which it was going to happen anyway.
Something as simple as that. It seems like almost under sophisticated to compare to what you used to do.
Yeah. It's those little things.
It's the devil's in the details. But no, but seriously, you got caught for something, relatively speaking, not as sophisticated as
absolutely.
Some of the stuff.
Absolutely.
It's the simple stuff. Which kind of leads me to the next question. How do you pick your next endeavor? Regular people, like, they switch jobs. They go out and say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to study this. I'm going to go and do this job. When you don't have that mindset, how do you pick kind of the next endeavor, or if you call it endeavor, your next project of what you're going to do?
You mean as a criminal or as a legal person?
No. As a criminal, like how they, because it seems like they all go in tandem. Like it's there's like in waves, as you mentioned. There's like this, this tax fraud. There's there's ATM fraud. There's all these categories, and now there's like ransomware and so on. But this, how does the one who is in that mindset of a criminal decides what to do next? Is it some sort of water cooler where they hang out and say, hey,
Well, it boils down to skill and access of tools and ease of the crime, how profitable the crime is compared to the what you put into it. All right. I was actually talking to Kelly Pope. She's a professor over at DePaul University, ethics professor, and she's a friend of mine. And we were talking about this. All criminals, I don't really care if it's online or physical world, there's a hierarchy, okay? And at the bottom of the hierarchy are your child predators, your people who hurt individuals. And at the top of that food chain are the people who steal from governments, institutions, things like that. It's the same thing in the cybercrime world. When you're talking about financial cybercrime, your bottom feeders are the individuals who steal from other individuals, from mom and pop stores, or just they scam a person out of their life savings or something like that. And the top of the food chain are those individuals who hit government systems, financial institutions, things like that. And the thought process is, well, we're not hurting individuals, we're just stealing from the government, or we're just stealing from the banks. And that's the justification is, hey, there are no victims except the government or the banks. Well, everyone's a victim. We just, as a criminal, you just have to justify that. And that hierarchy matters. I mean, as someone who's hitting that upper tier system of a financial institution or a government institution, they really look down on those other scammers who are hitting mom and pop stores or just individuals. I mean, it's really that hierarchy is in place. What you don't understand, and what criminals are they don't really want to admit is, and I was the same way, the crime, you commit the crime based on your skill level and what's accessible at the time. And that's regardless if you're this dude who's stealing, $60,000 a week, committing unemployment fraud during the pandemic, or you're the dude that's doing a romance scam. Your skill level and the access of the crime and the profitability of the crime is what determines that. And the reason I say that is I was stealing $160,000 a week, committing tax return fraud. Did that for 10 months out of the year. But when Shadowcrew gets shut down, I didn't have access to really do anything else. So I went back to scamming individuals because that was the only thing I had access to. And I needed money. When you're able to steal $160,000 a week, stealing $1,000 from an individual is not really worth it to you. The time and effort it takes to do that is not really worth it. But when you're not able to steal that $160,000 and you figure that you need cash to do something that you want to do, that $1,000 a week from an individual becomes a lot of money. So that's what determines the target.
Is there a lateral move or in the hierarchy, like in terms of, can you upgrade your skill set, or people that start small and then get to? And I also, and it's the second part of the question, I noticed some of those that go big, they become almost at a certain point, think that they're invincible. Like they caught this Ukrainian dude who went over to Poland, and he's responsible for like billions of dollars worth of ransomware. And I think what happened, at some point, he thought, okay, I'm like untouchable. I make $100 million a year, and they caught him in Poland because Poland has extradition, with the United States and so on. But is that something that typically happens?
Ego plays I can't really overstate the importance of ego when it comes to online criminals. I mean, ego matters. If you're looking at why someone commits a crime online, it's the willingness, it's ego, and then finally it's knowledge. What are you willing to do as a criminal? Are you willing to commit identity theft against someone like you, David, and cash out all your retirement funds? You may be willing to do that, but you may not be willing to divert the Social Security benefit payments of a senior citizen. Your moral compass may be point north just enough that you're like, well, I can't do that. So willingness matters, but ego, man, ego plays that part. You've got to believe that you can defeat that billion-dollar company, that billion-dollar security company, that it's David versus Goliath, and you can do that. So ego plays a huge part, but knowledge, if you can have the biggest ego in the world, be willing to commit any crime you want to. If you don't know how to do it, you're useless. So that the answer is that, so a beginning cyber criminal starts in a field, say he starts in refund fraud, which a lot of them are starting in now. That first party fraud where you order a product from a merchant, you get the product in, then you convince the merchant to give you the refund and keep the item at the same time. It's a social engineering technique. It's very effective, very profitable. Doesn't really require any skill whatsoever, but you start with something like that, or you start with credit card theft, something like that. Once you learn that crime, the dynamics of that crime, it allows you to take the profit that you're making and learn other types of crime. For example, if you're doing credit card theft, there's a whole skill set that's required to know how to do credit card theft effectively. You have to be able to potentially run browser fingerprints, privatized browsers, maybe VM boxes, new devices. You have to know that kind of stuff. You have to know how to set up a drop address. You have to know how to pick specific merchants, which ones are open, which ones are vulnerable, things like that. So there's a skill set that you develop as you're committing that type of crime. And then you look at the other types of crimes that are out there. So if you're looking at credit card theft, for example, a lot of the criminals that were committing credit card theft, it was a very easy pivot for them to move over into stimulus fraud, because a lot of the same tools that are used for credit card theft are used to commit unemployment fraud. So a lot of the times that's what happens is you start profiting once you're comfortable with the money that's coming in, and you're not worried about how you're going to pay your bills or buy those watches or whatever the hell you're wanting to buy. You then start to look at other types of crimes that's happening, and you continue to grow that.
It sounds like there's always an opportunity somewhere, right?
Always
presents itself. And so and I always trying to find the kind of the analogies between the kind of the dark and kind of the light world. So they say that people rise to the level of incompetence. So is there something like that in the criminal world?
I think there is. What's kind of interesting to me is anymore, when I began cybercrime, and I think I mentioned this when we first talked, when I began my career as a cyber criminal, that platform of cybercrime wasn't developed. And as such, everyone within that community really had to learn every aspect of cybercrime that was going around at that point in time. You had to know everything, or else you were going to go to prison. These days, you don't have to do that. These days, it's basically plug and play. Any 16-year-old can effectively and profitably commit some sort of cybercrime and walk away with a lot of money. That's just the way the platform operates these days. The platform works to network with other people. It works to train individuals. It works to provide those individuals with the tools or the tutorials that they need to commit that type of crime.
Is there profit sharing centers like Brett, like how they get a pool of people, like they do that sometimes with stock trading, where
Sure.
they let you go out and trade with somebody else's money, the house money, and then they get a commission of the profits. Is that also something that happens in the?
You have groups that so cyber criminals en masse are not really sophisticated attackers. They're really not. You have some of those sophisticated players out there, but their numbers very small. What you see is those sophisticated players have started to understand that, hey, yeah, we can develop ransomware, and that ransomware is very effective, but do we really want to spend our time trying to deploy that ransomware? Why not, work with someone that can deploy that with us? And so you have these individuals that have very little skill at all, except for a social engineering skill. They're very good at deploying that ransomware, getting someone to click on a link, or, they're brute forcing outward facing SMBs or any number of things like that. And they deploy that. And for that, they get a cut of the ransom that's there. So if you look at Revel, when they hit Colonial Pipeline, I think they hit Colonial for $3-4 million. The Revel cut of that was $2.1 million. The other $1.9 million went to the people who deployed that ransomware, that outside group that deployed that. So that's the profit sharing that takes place. As far as retirement funds or anything like that, nothing like that. What's kind of interesting to me, I said that attackers by and large are not sophisticated. The problem is that, and I say this, and I think I said it the first time we talked, is the problem is that 90% of every single attack uses known exploits. So it's not that the attackers are sophisticated. It's that the threat landscape is so large and the vulnerability is so, they're so huge. There's so many of them that it's very difficult to plug every single vulnerability. And a lot of the times the companies know about vulnerabilities and they won't plug them. You look at SolarWinds. I've got a 130-page class action lawsuit over there that talks about how SolarWinds knew about the exploits and kept them hidden for years, lied to investors and everything else. And that's an issue. These things that we know about, we've known about outward facing SMBs for years. We've known about Unicode domains for years. We've known about these issues for years. Yeah. And we're still not addressing those.
And sometimes not even an issue. Sometimes it's just a misconfigured RDP port. Things that are just open that somebody turned on and forgot to turn them off.
Exactly.
So it's as simple as that. And it's amazing because we collectively spend millions and not billions of dollars of deploying systems supposed to help us, and we have a whole community of cybersecurity professionals supposed to help us.
But the thing about it is, and I've got to say it now, the real cybersecurity professionals out there, they have been preaching this stuff again for years. And a lot of the time, it's not really the cybersecurity professionals that it's not their issue. It's management that's saying we don't have the budget, or no, we'll worry about it later, or no, we've got to worry about this. Or you've got the fraud department that, they complain about the products that the engineers are developing for so many times that all of a sudden they're not invited to board meetings anymore because they're now known not as the fraud department, but the no department. And we don't want that negativity in our room. So, you've got that type of stuff going on. Or you've got a business that's segmented all of a sudden. And I say that because of this refund fraud stuff. It's unbelievable, David. I was talking to a bunch that their fraud department first of all, their fraud department doesn't keep track of online fraud losses, which blows my mind. But not only that, but they don't even keep track of the losses due to refunds. And if they did, they wouldn't include that in the fraud losses because it would just increase their fraud loss numbers and destroy their figures. So I'm like, all right.
Brett, I suggest whoever listens to this not lie, to rewind what you just said and replay that, because it's packed with crazy logic. How does that make any sense? It's an oxymoron by itself that the fraud department does not report on fraud incidents.
Yeah.
So they don't want to show that their numbers are it makes no sense.
It's insane. Absolutely. But that's like this little snapshot of a lot of the entire cybersecurity industry.
So maybe there's a conspiracy theory, like a global one, where nobody wants to actually fix it because it's like, let's the train keep on moving on both sides of the house.
Yeah.
And it's good for everybody. It's good for the industry. It's good for the other side of the house. And it seems like a lot of people listen. It takes a lot of effort to make that train stop. And even now with the insurance, let's talk a bit about the insurance. The cyber insurance, right? So. Sure. Merck just won a very large lawsuit. I think it's like over $1 billion. And I suspect that because they managed, I guess, to prove that it was an act of war or some sort or whatever. But I'm suspected this is going to be battle in court for the next 10, 15 years by the time. But it looks like the insurance companies are getting smarter about insurance and what's included and what's the clause of getting out of it, because companies have been using it or abusing it, I should say, by saying, okay, let me just get insurance and not worry about it. What's your take on the whole cybersecurity insurance market?
It's insurance great. Insurance is great. But the issue is exactly what you said. Have you got a company that really doesn't worry, well, we're not going to worry about a ransomware attack because we've got insurance and they'll go ahead and pay the ransom. So we don't have to worry about putting the dollars needed to protect our organization against these attacks. That's an issue. And it's an issue that's a real issue. It's one of these things, David, where, on paper, things work out pretty well. But once it goes into actual practice, you have to deal with human thought patterns. And humans are very good about screwing things up and figuring out how to get around things. We need to save money, so let the insurance company work on it.
And then you have to prove, I think, in court that you've done the due diligence, right?
Right.
And that's also a very gray area. How do you prove that? Like, for example, if you said what you just said about the fraud department not doing what they're supposed to do out loud,
right?
But it's so outrageous that people say, "Well, that's not possible."
Right. Right. Nobody believes that. Right. You say it, but nobody believes that. Nobody. Right. What you mean? An online fraud department doesn't keep track of losses online? No, he's just saying that
because it's so out there. Maybe you should do, Brett, is like maybe find incrementally say that somehow find lead people in the journey towards, because you're like telling them that something that they thought was white is black all these years, right? So maybe there's a way for you to describe that journey and walk them slowly, not like hit them with a hammer over the head with this. I'm thinking out loud here. There's got to be a way for you to describe that in a better way.
The problem, David, is that Brett Johnson tends to be the hammer and everything's a nail. So it's very difficult to take them by the hand and say, now come along with me. We're going to take a journey.
So, but hold on. You do that. You talk to a lot of executives, right? You do a lot of executive briefings and so on. And executives are smart. They're like they're some of them are tenacious. They got there because of a particular reason. They're good at what they do. They have a mindset of
sure.
And then we talked to them about this fraud and how prevalent it is and how they protect themselves. I'm sure there's a lot of nods in the room, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like somebody says, "Oh, Brett, you're like you're full of it." No, I mean you make total sense, and you also have, unfortunately, the credentials to prove that what you say is correct. So you come with de facto, you have the authority to say what you say.
Sure.
So but they nod, and then what happened? You leave the room and what?
You mentioned sometimes they nod, sometimes they do. I'm the guy that I'm that hammer. I mean, I typically, if I'm talking to someone, I really don't care what your title is. I don't. And that tends to upset people sometimes. I worked hard for this title. Well, good for you. But, I say what needs to be said, and I don't really have much of a filter in that. Now, I'm trying to get that filter. I truly am. And I'll give you an example. I was talking a few weeks ago to the CISO of an extremely large company, and we started talking about refund fraud. So I started pulling up, he trusted what I said, but I said, let me show you some stuff that's happening on Telegram, how they're defrauding and stuff like that. So we started talking about that, and I was talking about the organized nature of the fraud. And he was adamant in saying that, well, there might be some organized elements, but we really believe that it's mostly just individuals on their own committing this fraud. Now, we're talking about a merchant who can be defrauded for $130,000 a pop.
Wow.
Okay.
That's big.
It's huge. It's huge. And I tried to correct him initially, and I let it go because I knew I'd be talking to him again. And I figured at that point that I could, as you said, I could slowly bring him into this understanding that, hey, you know, this idea that you've got that it's just some guy that's deciding on his own to defraud you for $130,000 is not really accurate. It's an organization that's doing this. Everyone's working together to defraud you. So I did take it easy at that point in time. I'm not quite sure if that was the right approach for me to take. I still question myself on that.
I think it's the nature of people. Sometimes they just don't want to, know or realize. It happens to me. When I interviewed somebody who spoke specifically about business email compromise, BEC, right, and how people that get defrauded over the years and they get caught by law enforcement for laundering some money, whatever. And then whoever they thought was their lover, quote unquote, for all those years, and they tell them and then end up, actually notifying their quote unquote lover, whoever, and then, even after they've been put in jail, they still think that something was wrong, in a sense that it doesn't matter what you put in front of them and what the consequences are. They still do not believe that was possible because their mind cannot grasp that after all those years, what they were actually going through was fraudulent and not a true love story.
Right. And that's the issue that I have with kind of taking it easy is I don't believe that it does that victim any good to humor them. I think that it's best to just rip that Band-Aid off and tell the truth the way it is. And sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. That person that's that victim of a romance scheme that's been led on, that's been involved in some sort of fraud, that, fraudsters got him to cash out money or launder money. That person may never accept what happened, because their need to believe that it was real outweighs any type of reality that you could present them with. It's that idea. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that to you, but one of the things I talk about is the perception of reality is much more important than reality itself. The perception of truth is more important than the truth. It doesn't matter what the actual facts of the matter is. It matters what I can convince you of or what you want to believe. I think that's a problem with fake news. That's a problem with a lot of these romance schemes. That's a problem with somebody like you're talking about that, was so ingrained in that fraud and the belief of, this is something that's romantic. This person really loves me, that they're incapable of accepting the truth. And that's a problem.
It is a problem. So let's, and I feel like we should do this again. I think we were just scratching the surface of a couple of things. I was about to talk to you about NFTs and some of the because maybe we should jump into that because I have a couple of things that are, I saw a comment you mentioned and I sent you the other day, the kind of the Beanie Baby, the documentary about what happened to the Beanie Babies because you were riding that Beanie Baby wave at some point and managed to sell quite a few Beanie Babies that weren't quite the right color.
Right.
So maybe let's maybe describe what NFTs are just briefly so people that are not aware, and then maybe talk about what your take is on that and
so
what you think it's going.
I am sure, and I forgot you asked me, I could before we were talking today, I could rattle off what NFTs, non-fungible token, whatever that is, non-fungible token.
Yeah, essentially it's you have an asset that you can prove that it's yours, but it's a digital asset. I think in the kind of layman terms.
And for all intents and purposes, right now that equates to JPEGs. Pictures of apes or rabbits.
What about videos? I thought there was also
there's some videos too.
Yep.
There's some videos,
which
too,
is video is a combination of JPEGs,
right?
Just running in a 24-second,
right. So and what's interesting is that they're being marketed as art or items of extreme rarity, and some of these things are going off at millions of dollars for a JPEG because you are the sole owner. But what we found out on, there's one of these marketplaces at OpenSea where they actually admitted the other day that 80% of every NFT on there is counterfeit. So, it's like, okay, all right.
So that's amazing that the speed of which the fraudsters are adapting to while everybody's, I'm sure like if one of, maybe like if you asked on the street, like, 10 people, what are NFTs? Maybe like 2 would know, right? At this point. But it's amazing. Fraudsters are already on top of it. They already like managed to.
You go to where the money is.
Yeah, it's how quickly, that progresses before people even start to figure out the fraudsters are already on top of what's happening. It's amazing.
It truly is. It truly is. But there's unfortunately, and I forgot who told me that. It was Nick Brown. Nick Brown made that comment. CISO, great guy, and we were talking about NFTs and the cryptocurrency market right now, and I called them investors. And Nick corrected me and called them gamblers. And it hit me. I was like, you're right. It's not an investor. It's not someone who's doing any type of research at all. It's someone who's gambling, someone who's taking a chance on a product or a service that it will go through the roof. And, a lot of these tokens, if you're talking about cryptocurrency, a lot of these tokens are doing that. A lot of them are going bankrupt. And because of that gambler attitude of not researching before you throw money at something, scammers can make a lot of money. A lot of money. How easy is it to create an ERC token or a BEP token? Easy. Or you can pay someone $200 and do that.
I'll use the kind of the more politically correct term, like speculators, right?
There you go. There you go. Speculators, which means that they don't do any research. They just throw money at it.
Well, what about the time that I saw somebody like buying a piece of art and then, smashing it, and then selling, the digital version of this smashing video of that as to the highest bidder.
Sure. So you sell that, and my thing about NFTs, and I don't want anybody to think, because there's a whole group of people out there saying, hey, it's not just these JPEGs. And you're right. It's not just these JPEGs, but right now it's just these JPEGs. That technology later on will find a good purpose and be valuable. But these JPEGs in 5 years, what are they going to be worth? Is that picture of that ape that's going for, I think one of them's going for $30 million. Is that damn thing going to be worth $30 million in 5 years? Come on, man. It's a picture of an ape with a cigar in its mouth. Seriously? No. Hell, Banksy stuff isn't selling for that kind of money right now.
I don't know. Maybe, bubbles have a tendency, or like pyramid schemes have a tendency to overshoot,
They
sometimes. So what's next for what about the, meta fraud? Right. So the metaverse, we're starting to see some of that going on, people buying assets there. And I'm surprised we haven't seen any like real, it's still, everything is so new, but we haven't seen any cases of like,
no, but you're going to see that. Certainly we're seeing a lot of, a lot of the crypto tokens that are metaverse related. An associate of mine, his name's Michael Patron. He was involved in the Quadriga currency exchange scandal a few years ago. He starts up another token just a few weeks ago called, what was it called? Wonderland Time was what it was. That token went up to $10,000 a pop. Then it crashed. Once it came out that he was involved with it, it crashed down to $300 a token. So, a lot of the investors lost their entire life savings because they didn't do any proper research. That's the same thing with this metaverse thing. People are just in a rush to be the first ones in. And I'll grant you there's going to be a lot of money made, a lot of legitimate money made, but there's going to be a lot of scam money made by fraudsters as well because of that rush to profit, that rush of people throwing money at it without doing any research, just cash, cash, cash. And when people are giving away cash, fraudsters will come in and take advantage of it. Absolutely.
I think, Brett, we should dissect the kind of the current news every once in a while, because there's just so much of it going on.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a very unique take on it from the inside of what that looks like. So I would love to do that in the very near term.
Yeah, absolutely.
But until then, when is your podcast coming out and air? Maybe you should just go.
I'm recording the first episode today. The first episode is on synthetic refund fraud. So, for years we've had a bunch of these consultants and businesses trying to protect merchants from refund fraud. It's been failing miserably. And it turns out that now a lot of these fraudsters are using synthetic identity profiles to help commit refund fraud against merchants. So the first episode is going to be that. Then I'm going to backtrack and talk about who the host is, and then we'll go into some crime and some cybersecurity with other episodes as well. That should be out today.
That sounds amazing. Where can you subscribe to it?
You will be able to find the first episode initially on YouTube, The Brett Johnson Show. The first episode will be on YouTube. Within the week, we'll have a website up, things like that, so you can reference as well. I'll announce everything on LinkedIn, Twitter, social media as well.
Awesome, Brett. I can't wait. And I always wanted to have a synthetic identity. Maybe it's something you can help me with.
Sure, why not? Everybody else seems to have one these days.
Thanks all for whoever joined today. Thank you very much. Until then, stay safe. Online and offline.
David, thank you.
Take care. Thank you again.